It's sort of right up there with the question of why there are no seatbelts on school buses. Why are there no seatbelts for babies on airplanes? Transport Canada has known about the dangers of simply holding a baby in your lap during a flight for decades. And there has actually been a fatality in Canada directly connected to the lack of baby restraints. Go Public's Rosa Marcatelli has more.
This crash landing in 2012 is a sad example of what can happen. 6-month-old Isaac Andy Apakuk from Nunavut was killed. Like all babies, he was traveling on his mother's lap. The adult passengers, wearing seatbelts, had minor injuries. According to the investigation that followed, the infant was expelled from his mother's arms and later found next to the captain's rudder pedals. The Transportation Safety Board recommended Transport Canada work with industry to develop age and size-appropriate child restraint systems and make them mandatory. That hasn't happened.
I remember the news story about a little boy that died being held in his parents' arms from turbulence, and that stuck with me.
Toronto mom Susan Muscovich tries taking matters into her own hands by bringing a Transport Canada-approved child seatbelt on flights with her 2-year-old daughter.
The red belt goes around the back of the airplane seat, so you have...
3 times flight attendants told her she couldn't use it.
It's mind-boggling.
Transport Canada doesn't track how many small children 2 and above with their own seats have been hurt. It lumps them in with adults. We do know since 2001, 6 babies have been injured when they were thrown from their parents' laps. This is what can happen to a baby during turbulence or a crash. And according to Transport Canada's own advisory, small children using adult-sized seat belts could suffer severe internal injuries if that belt slips in an emergency.
Go Public found information dating back to 1979, warning babies and small children should not be allowed to fly as they still are today. In 1993, Transport Canada even took the step of hiring a company to design a child seatbelt that would work on all airplanes. That prototype made it to the final stages, but then the idea just disappeared. Transport Canada won't say why. Recently, it again looked at the issue, doing what it calls a risk assessment, but abandoned that too, stating there were more pressing priorities.
We're required to restrain coffee pots in the galley for takeoff and landing and for turbulence, but we're not required to restrain infants.
Barbara Dunn advises Airlines and Transport Canada on safety issues. She says a stumbling block is figuring out the economics. One Transport Canada estimate puts the cost at more than $10 million a year for airlines. The other problem, Dunn says, is finding a restraining device that's approved for all airplanes in and outside the country.
It's one of the biggest pushbacks from the airlines themselves. They want to know that if something is certified in Canada, it's going to be usable everywhere else in the world.
Transport Canada tells us it's now doing an in-depth examination of the issue that should be complete this fall, followed by public and industry consultations. It's encouraging parents to buy a separate seat for babies on flights and bring their own approved child seats for any child under the age of 7. Air Canada and WestJet say they're just following Transport Canada's rules. Rosa Marcatelli, CBC News, Calgary.